analogy that I once heard, that when God created the world, which is Rosh Hashanah time, he created the nightingale. A nightingale is a bird with a beautiful voice. And the bird said to God, he said, please, God, give me something to protect myself from predators, because here I may be perched on a branch in the dusk, serenading into the night, and people are loving my melody. However, a hungry animal may be looking for dinner. So God offered the bird a beak, a sharp beak, and the bird rejected the beak. Then God offered the bird claws. And again, the bird said, an elegant bird like me, claws like that, no. And finally, God offered the bird wings. The bird looked at the wings and said to God, I don't understand what the purpose of these wings are. I have enough body weight to carry with me, and you give me 2 extra pieces of dead weight, will just weigh me down further and make it more difficult to escape my enemies. So God said, no, little bird. These are called wings. Wings, when you learn to use them, will help you soar, help you fly, and reach places far beyond. So yes, they are more weight, but they empower you. I always think of this when it comes to the high holiday season, because on one hand, Judaism in general, the Torah, mitzvot, these are obligations. And the prayer service, I mean, it's hours sometimes the prayers take. And one could ask, isn't that just a lot of dead weight? And people ask that question. Our children ask the question. We ask that question. But the challenge and the gift is to recognize the wings, to recognize that, yes, there are expectations, there are responsibilities, there are commitments that these high holidays present, but they also offer us wings, transcendence, to reach levels that you can't reach on your own. And that's what I believe is the focus. Now, how do you do that? You mentioned the word personalized. The key is to personalize the experience, to personalize Rosh Hashanah. It's not just the beginning of the year. It's not just the head of the year. It's not just the day that God created the universe, created Adam and Eve, the day we sound the shofar. It has to be personal. And it's always good to ask the challenging question. If someone asks you, a skeptic asks you, your child asks you, why are we sitting in synagogue for an hour, 2 hours? Why are we sounding the shofar? We have to have a personal answer, because this is about you. This is empowering. This is elevating. This is transcendent. It helps us reach places that we could never reach without Rosh Hashanah. In other words, Rosh Hashanah has to be indispensable. The high holidays have to be something you can't live without. Can't be optional. You know, today we have a lot of options out there. And if you don't find that personal relevance, there are a lot of other distractions that will pull us away and seduce us. So in my own words, that's what I think is the goal of this evening, is to empower each of us, myself and all of us, with tools that really are indispensable, that can transform our lives, our families' lives, our work lives, our personal lives, our marriages, our interactions on every possible level. And again, thank you for the opportunity to try to share and achieve exactly that.
That's great. So can you talk a little bit about Rosh Hashanah? Maybe just give a few kind of overview comments about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, Mark, you like statistics, right?
Yeah.
So I read
like
a statistic.
Like a framework, yeah.
Yeah. An interesting statistic that over 90% of Americans believe in some form of God and spirituality, but only 40% affiliate with the religion. That's a pretty serious discrepancy. And I thought about it, because religion and spirituality are not seen as synonymous. You know, religion, what are the knee-jerk reactions when we think about religion? We think of in terms of laws, holidays, synagogue, responsibility. If you go a little, the negative, the Woody Allen version, you'll have words like guilt, neurosis, fear, punishment, punitiveness, judgment, condescension. I don't want to go through the whole list. When you talk about spirituality, people will say spirituality, transcendence, love, open-mindedness, experiencing something that is greater than yourself. Rosh Hashanah, unfortunately, for many, they see it as a day we have to tremble. Day of judgment. This is the day where we're written in the book of life or death. This is the day your destiny. This is the day where you have to stand in front of the heavenly court, and all your sins are going to have to be addressed. A day of confession. What's missing, talk about the wings, what's missing in that is the fundamental, most important thing. And I think it's critical. Before we get into any prayer, any tradition, or any custom, what is the essence of Rosh Hashanah? You know what it is? It's your birthday and my birthday. It's the day that Adam and Eve were created, and created with a gift, a divine gift. The Bible tells us, the Torah tells us, the human being was created in the divine image with a mission. We have an indispensable mission and calling to fulfill. Rosh Hashanah is essentially the renewal of our contract with God as partners with God in changing this world for the better. So it's really the question of Rosh Hashanah is one very straightforward question. Are you living up to your calling? Are you living up to your mission? Are you living up to the indispensable contribution that you were blessed with? You're here for a reason. You're not here by accident. You have a real purpose. And Rosh Hashanah is the renewal of that purpose. So Rosh Hashanah allows us the opportunity, as the mystics put it, that right before Rosh Hashanah, the entire universe and the individual goes into some type of cosmic slumber, anxiously anticipating to be renewed, the contract be renewed. So actually Rosh Hashanah is something to be embraced, not to be afraid of. This is a day where God is giving us a vote of confidence and says, I want you here in this world. You're here for a reason. I want you. I want to renew my contract with you. And we know that accountability is very much part of a true relationship. Who do you hold accountable to? Only people you respect, people you love. God forbid someone that's unfortunately handicapped or in any way limited, you can't really hold them accountable. So accountability shouldn't be seen as fearful. It should actually be seen as there's a vote of confidence. I believe in you. And that's why we're accountable. So Rosh Hashanah is actually a celebration of our indispensable purpose in this world. I love the expression, birth is God saying you matter. The single most important thing to know in life is that your life matters. It's not another grain of sand on a beach with 8 billion people. We're negligible, and people ask the question, do I really care? Do I really matter? You absolutely matter. And Rosh Hashanah is a declaration of personal value of your life and your decisions. And I would even go a step further. I'd say the founding fathers, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, and let's call it all people are created equal, and with inalienable rights endowed to us by the Creator, it's straight out of the Rosh Hashanah book. That's what happened on Rosh Hashanah, that all people were created, every one of us, with a unique and indispensable mission. I think if we put our minds and our hearts to that focus, everything else in Rosh Hashanah gets enriched because it's all about you. That's the question. It's not a question how much money you made this year, not a question of how much fun you had, question of your very calling. We all know a company can't exist without a mission statement. Rosh Hashanah is the question, your mission statement. What is it, and are you living up to it? That is the essence of Rosh Hashanah.
That's great. Maybe we'll go through a couple of the prayers here. So the first is, and I call it under the hood, so you'll really get into it, maybe create a memorable kind of framework for everybody. The shofar prayer, if you could talk about that.
Okay. This year, actually, we don't sound the shofar because the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbat. We sound it on day 2, but that doesn't mean we don't have the power of the shofar. So the shofar is the central mitzvah of Rosh Hashanah. In the words of the Talmud, it says the mitzvah of this day, shofar, which again, immediately provokes the question, what does shofar have to do with all of this? You know, we understand it's a ram's horn. It symbolizes ram's horn in the story of Abraham and Isaac, the ram's horn that was sounded at Sinai. There's many symbolism. The great sage, Rab Sadia Gaon, gives 10 symbolisms and reasons for shofar. Maimonides writes, shofar is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call. It's a sound. But let's go a bit deeper. You know, what comes to mind is a story, if I may share. During the Holocaust, as we know, unfortunately, tragically, so many of the families, when they were taken away, so they gave their children to the protection of the non-Jewish neighbors. And they said, when we come back, we'll come back for our children. And unfortunately, many did not return. So some of these children ended up in non-Jewish homes, and some of them actually ended up in convents, in churches across Europe. And when family members after the war, after the liberation, after the war, came back to find these children, so many of their neighbors, many of the families said they died, they disappeared, we don't know where they are. They didn't reveal the fact that they were being brought up as Christians in these convents. See, an interesting thing that happened. One of the community leaders, one of the rabbis, came up with a brilliant idea. In the evening, before the children went to sleep, he went around the convent and said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That famous prayer. We'll talk about that more, I'm sure, soon in Yom Kippur. And you know what happened? Children began to cry. Tati, Mami, Abba, Ima, Papa, Mama. Because the Shema aroused in them that primal connection that they remember when they would go to sleep every night. The Shema was said to them. And that's how they identify those Jews. So the Rabbi Yitzchak Berditchev, one of the great mystics, says that the call of the shofar is actually the most primal sound of all. Now, we know we have many instruments, and we have harps, we have violins, we have pianos, but a shofar is just the purest sound that approximates and symbolizes the call of the soul, the deepest call of the soul. So from the beginning of time, God said, here, Rosh Hashanah, when you reconnect to your mission, when you reconnect with me, I'm giving you an instrument. This instrument will pierce all the heavens and is able to touch a part of you that is like that innocent inner child that you all have. And even as we grow into adults and we develop all kinds of mechanisms and defense systems, and everyone knows the complexities of our lives, but there's always that primal sound. On Rosh Hashanah, come back to me, cry to me, and I will cry back to you. It represents the deepest connection between a child and a parent, like the Shema. When you say something and it touches you, and it's like a song you heard when you were a little kid, nobody can deny how it awakens us. So shofar is really the symbol, and using a little more mystical language, it says it reaches what's called the etzem hanefesh, the core of the soul. But we have to allow ourselves, and the different sounds all reflect different expressions of that soul. So it's really a spiritual sound that manifests in a physical way, and it has that piercing effect. I mean, as I'm speaking, it reminds me when I was a little child. I remember my father going to shul with me, and the shofar always had that call. That was its simplicity. It's not a sophisticated sound. It's not elaborate. It's not one of these symphonies, but it has something about it that really is like the cry of a child, and you feel that you can connect on the deepest possible level. That's in a nutshell, obviously a topic that really deserves a lot more than what I'm saying right now.
Thanks. That was great. Now, we want to do Avinu Malkeinu, if you could give some insight.
Sure. So we all know the song of Avinu Malkeinu, right? If we had more time, we could sing the song together, but with the limited time. So Avinu Malkeinu, of course, is one of the primary prayers of Rosh Hashanah. And it means my Father, our King. The question is, what does that mean? And then we say a whole bunch of phrases, different Avinu Malkeinus, asking for a year of compassion, a year of life, a year of health, a year of abundance. But we all keep saying Avinu Malkeinu. In a way, you can even ask the question, father and king are very two different types of relationships. A father and child relationship, a parent and child, is far more one of compassion, of love. A king is far more distant. A king is more of an authority. When we crown God as king, it's more, we accept your sovereignty, we accept your authority, we accept your leadership. More about a leader as opposed to a father. So one of the beautiful explanations in this is that a true relationship has to have both components, one that's intimate and one that's respectful. Let's just take an example, spouses, husband and wife, they love each other deeply, and they're connected as one. Let's take the best case scenario. But intimacy, as deep as it may be, also requires space, because two individuals also have their boundaries and their need for space. As much as you love each other, it wouldn't be healthy, for example, for a husband and wife, for two people who love each other, to be 24/7 in the same place. It just doesn't work well. We need also to recognize our individuality. As they say, love is like one circle, second circle, and they come together like that. Any love that annihilates the other, where one is completely passive and the other one is completely dominant, is not a balanced relationship. So that's why relationship requires closeness, that there's an intimate closeness. Obviously, without that, there isn't true love. But love also means there's respect. There's even a recognition of the mystique of the other. You don't have to control the other person in a relationship. So the same idea is with God. Our relationship with God is one of intimate, like a father and son, or father and daughter, or parent and child. That's a closeness. You can go, a child goes to their parent crying. You don't need any introductions. You don't need to come with, obviously you need to respect your parent, but it's a far more closer one. But there's another relationship with God. It's recognizing I am not God. I'm not we're not equals. There is the concept of recognizing a higher authority, recognizing that there's an eye that sees, an ear that hears. There's an accountability that we have as a subject has to a king. And Avinu Malkeinu is the interesting mix of both, that it's our father and also our king, and it's both a relationship of closeness and a relationship of respect, awe, reverence, and recognizing the need to have also that there are things that are beyond us, that transcend, and the relationship that is close to us, something that is beyond and over and beyond. That's a brief combination of Avinu Malkeinu, briefly at least.
That's great. So now we're at halftime now, and I want to thank Hillary Barr for giving this suggestion. So
we have a halftime show, Mark?
Yeah, well, the halftime show is this question, and it's problematic. Prayers say that who are good will have a good year, and those who are not, who by fire and who by water. Somehow it just doesn't work. There's a paradox here. Like this doesn't hold true in the reality of our living or our lives. If you could kind of explain that and put perspective on that.
Okay, I'm glad we're going into the thornier issues, the more complex ones. So let me rephrase the question, if I may. I'll make it even more, let's build it up even further. Here we told Rosh Hashanah determines the destiny of our lives. And God will determine who will live and who will die, and whether we will be very successful, will be less successful, the destiny of our lives. And we're told that our good deeds, our mitzvot, and our compassion and our kindness will bring kindness and compassion in return. So, of course, the big question is, does that really happen? Or, in the words of Job, why is it then that good people suffer? Why do bad things happen to good people? And why do good things happen to bad people? It really undermines the whole premise and the whole thesis of these high holidays, that good deeds are rewarded. And that's what we tell ourselves, we tell our children. And so I'm just adding a bit more. So, of course, this touches upon the $1 million or the $1 billion question of good and evil, of right and wrong. So let me say this. We don't understand the mysteries of God's ways. Oh, listen, I mentioned the Holocaust. Why did 6 million innocent Jews have to be massacred in such a way? 1.5 million children. What did they do wrong? I don't have an answer. I don't think anyone has an answer. I think actually if anyone tried to answer, that itself would be obscene. We don't have an answer for that. It's the mysteries. Will we ever have an answer? I don't know. But it's interesting in Judaism, we've suffered greatly and we have many questions. But what Jews were always wise about was that their ultimate question was not why, but what are we going to do about it? I remember asking Eli Wiesel, he was a good friend of my father's, and I maintained the relationship. I said to him, is it true that when the Jews marched to the gas chambers, or marched, I should say, that some of them sang the song Ani Maiman, I believe with complete faith in the coming of the Messiah? So he said, well, we were not near the barracks were not near the gas chambers because they wanted to keep us, so-called, keep us in the dark. But we knew what was going on. But in the barracks, all the time, that song, prayers, Kaddish, Moda'ani, Shema. Constantly you heard it all the time. So I said, with respect, I'm just an American kid born in freedom. But I want to understand, isn't that like somewhat insane? The Jews are being led to the massacre in the worst possible way. They had all the right to be angry at God. And instead they're singing his praises and hoping Mashiach. I mean, this was like the darkest moment in history. And I remember what he responded to me, and I heard it from many other Holocaust survivors. You know what he said? He said, you have to understand, it wasn't a cry of desperation, of denial, of fantasy. It wasn't escapism. It was the Jews declaring that you may take our bodies, but you can't take our souls. You may take our lives, but you can't take our faith. And if it won't be us, it will be our children. We will prevail, because that's our story. From the time of Egypt, the Egyptian slavery, all the way through the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Greeks and the Romans and the Ottomans and the Spanish, we will make it through. In other words, we don't really know why it doesn't always work the way we would like. So I bring it back to this question. I want to personalize it. I don't want to just keep it philosophical. It's a very big question, of course. Someone will say, I'm praying on Rosh Hashanah for a good year. I'm trying to be the best. And then something happens that it doesn't seem to work out that way. And many people also come away with this attitude I mentioned before, that God is going to punish us and God is waiting to be punitive. You did something wrong. I mean, that always bothered me. Why would God do that? He created flawed human beings. So the answer is the opposite. Rosh Hashanah teaches us that you are here because God wants you here, because he loves you. But life and death has a mystery to it. And that mystery is something we can't always fathom. So I would say briefly on a topic like this, which really deserves its own session, and maybe, Mark, that should be the next one about this big topic. I will just say that the bottom line is that it should not in any way perturb us, because this is one of the big questions of life. But at the same time, we are here and we continuously maintain the confidence. We are not going to give up just because it doesn't always work out. We don't always get the prayer we want answered. That doesn't mean we give up. It means we forge ahead and we hope absolutely and believe in goodness, and we're committed to goodness no matter how it works out. We always believe that it will work out well, but if it doesn't work out exactly as we planned it, that does not stop us from being committed to what we believe in. And that's a sign of human dignity. It's a sign of human strength. That's not a sign of weakness. It's on the contrary. So I say to you, Hillary, you asked the question. Anyone else has this question? We all have the same question. I'm not going to suggest that I have a quick answer, but I do know that we have to look at these days as days of confidence in us, and that we will do what we have to do. And look, after the Holocaust, the state of Israel was born. There's a renaissance of Jewish life in Israel and abroad, unprecedented. No one could have imagined it. I'm not justifying what happened, but we see Jews forged ahead, rebuilt, and look what we have today. We have our challenges, but no one can say everyone wrote obituaries on the Jewish people 80 years ago after World War II. But we're here. Look, we're here together here, celebrating, ready to enter Rosh Hashanah. And we believe firmly that we will carry the baton to the finish line. And as the Jews prayed and sang that, yes, there will be redemption, that will put personal and global redemption, because we never give up on that hope and on the belief, absolute belief in what is good, and that goodness will ultimately prevail and ultimately vanquish any evil or darkness.
Great. So now we're going to move to Yom Kippur. If you could give maybe a bit of overview, and then we'll go to a couple of the prayers there.
Absolutely. So, moving right along, here's this like Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, with all that has happened, with most Jews not going to synagogue throughout the year, Yom Kippur seems to be a day that still remains embedded in Jewish consciousness, the holiest day of the year. But ask yourself, why is it the holiest day of the year? Is it random? Could it have been another day of the year? What happened to Yom Kippur that makes it such a holy day? And we fast, and we wear white, Day of Atonement, Day of Forgiveness. What makes it such a holy day? So the answer is actually a little history lesson, very brief. What happened in Yom Kippur? So after the Jewish people stood at Sinai and received the Torah, so we know that 39 days later, Moses was up on the mountain studying with God. The Jewish people decided to build a golden calf. They gave up. They thought Moses wasn't returning. However, it's explained. Bottom line is they betrayed God. They heard at Sinai, the second of the 10 commandments, thou shalt not have false gods. Thou shalt not serve other gods. And that's exactly what they did. They built a golden calf and they worshipped it. One of the gravest sins, avodah zarah, idolatry. Moses comes down from the mountain. We know the story. He sees what they did. After you just stood at such a revelation. And what happens? He shatters the tablets. People think that was out of anger or out of lack of control. No, it was very deliberate, actually. Rashi, the great commentary, explains he tore up the ketubah, the marriage contract, because he could go back to God and say, look, it's true they sinned, but they never signed the dotted line. They never received the tablets. They were shattered. And that's indeed what he did. He demanded from the Jews accountability, but he marched back up on the mountain and for 40 days and 40 nights prayed for forgiveness. And he was not successful. We're told he was not successful. But he went up another time, another 40 days. On the first day of Elul, Rosh Chodesh Elul, he went up the third time on the mountain. The first 40 days he received the Torah. The second 40 days he was rejected. And the third set of 40 days, when does it conclude? On Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, Moses was finally successful in prevailing over God to forgive the people. That's why, right after Kol Nidre, Yom Kippur night, what do we say? God said, Salachti kidvarecha. I forgive them as you have asked me to do. If you think about it, it's mind-boggling. A man of flesh and blood, Moses, stood up to God, would not take no for an answer, kept knocking on the door, and finally God gave in and forgave the people. So, in short, Yom Kippur is the birth of hope, is the birth of forgiveness. Imagine life without hope. Imagine life without forgiveness. We're all human beings, is what Moses, paraphrasing what Moses said to God. We're human beings. We're flawed. Nobody's perfect. So they made a mistake. It was a deliberate mistake. They deserve to be called on it. I'm not denying that. But you can't tell me that you're closing the door, because if that's the case, human beings are always going to make mistakes. You need to tell me that if we work hard enough, we can regain your favor. So basically, it's the story of love betrayed, and then reconciliation. So Yom Kippur gives us the greatest gift of all, the gift that no matter what happens in life, even if there's a breach, even if there's a betrayal, even if there's an infidelity and a violation, we always can find a ray of hope. On Yom Kippur, the door opens up that yes, if you apply yourself and you initiate and you do what you have to do, I will open up a door for you that everybody can correct past mistakes. Again, think of life if there was no such hope. Then we're damaged goods. There's nowhere to go. That's why Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. Because you see, trust is not built on perfection. It's built on accountability. And Yom Kippur, we show we're accountable, and God responds and says, I will then open up the door. And yes, we can find the love that we always had, even though it may have been hurt, there may have been a schism was built, it was a breach of trust, but we can rebuild. So Yom Kippur is that holiest day of the year. Moses gave us a gift that's an eternal gift, that no matter what happens in life, there's always the ability to correct, to repair. I use this personally, frankly, in counseling couples, individuals, many people who've suffered great traumas in their lives, individually or in families or in marriage and so on. This story of Yom Kippur, to me, is the story of all healing and all recovery, that there's hope. No matter what happened, do not think that the damage is so severe that you cannot fix it. It may be hard work, but everything is fixable. Yom Kippur is essentially saying, There's no such thing as impossible. That's why it's such a powerful, powerful holy day.
That's great. So now we're going to turn to some of the prayers. So on the first night, Kol Nidre, if you could give some insight to that.
Yes, so I have to tell you, Kol Nidre always bothered me. When I was a little child, I used to always ask my father and my teachers and everybody, what is this? Why do we start the holiest day of the year with this odd, bizarre prayer? It's beautiful, haunting melody. It goes back, they say, hundreds of years. I don't know how long back. We all know Kol Nidre sound. Kol Nidre, as you probably know from a trivia point of view, is the first song sung in Hollywood. Basically, the first movie, Soundy, you have Al Jolson singing Kol Nidre in The Jazz Singer. I always thought it was a Jewish conspiracy that they stuck into the movies. The first song of all is going to be Kol Nidre. Interesting. But Kol Nidre is very much part of our liturgy, part of our history, part of our tradition. But if you look at the words, you start asking yourself, it's like a very strange prayer. It's only about vows and oaths and promises that we're absolving ourselves of all our oaths and all the promises, and in almost like 10 different ways. It's essentially like a legal statement that I am freeing myself from all the promises I've made. That's the beginning of Yom Kippur. Why would that be the opening prayer? And then I realized that when you start reading the Hebrew, you realize the Hebrew and the English doesn't do full justice to the Hebrew prayer. The words for nidre, neder means to be bound to something. Yes, it's an oath. When you make an oath, you take a vow, you're bound by your word to the promise you made. But it's much deeper than just the words you said. There's being bound to something. If Yom Kippur is going to be the birth of hope and forgiveness, the first thing we need to do is untie ourselves of all the things that trap us, our fears, our insecurities, everything that binds us. So what Yom Kippur is really saying, Kol Nidre is really saying as we open Yom Kippur, that before we go into this holy day, or as we enter the holy day, the first thing is you have to free yourself of your old baggage. That you want to come like a newborn child, clean. And Kol Nidre essentially is absolving ourselves of all those commitments. We're not talking about healthy commitments. All the unhealthy commitments, the addictions, the things that keep us trapped, the things that limit us, the inhibitions, the fears, the insecurities, everything that doesn't allow us to really experience something new. You know, the famous cliche, insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. Or as they say in healing, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Kol Nidre is essentially the mindset is that I am ready for change, but I have to free myself. If you're going to say, I want change, but you're not ready to open a window for fresh air, you can't, how are you going to get that change? So like another way of putting it is if you thought what you thought and you speak and you say what you said and you do what you did, you're going to have what you had. That's a mathematical certainty. So Kol Nidre is saying, I'm going to think a bit differently. I'm going to speak differently. I'm going to do something different. You're unbinding yourself from the vows and the oaths and the promises and all the things that trap us and limit us from being able to experiencing something new. That is the Kol Nidre prayer. And then we say, as I mentioned before, that God has forgiven us. And then begins the rest of the prayer that opens us up to the whole Yom Kippur experience. Want to continue through the prayers, right?
Yeah. So the next one would be 13 attributes.
The 13 attributes. Okay. So what happened on the mountain when Moses finally prevailed over God and said, God said, I'll give you forgiveness. So it's a very interesting chapter. It's in the book of Exodus, where it talks about this very intimate conversation between God and Moses and God, and Moses keeps on pushing and beseeching and pleading. And God finally says to him, okay, I see you're sincere. I see your depth, your love for the people. I see you're ready to give your life for them. Because remember, Moses had also said to God, erase my name from the Torah if you don't forgive them. So God saw that Moses was real. He was ready to sacrifice himself. So you know what he says? God says, what happens when you call to a father? We talked about a father. Compassion. A tremendous amount of empathy came out of God. However, we explain that on a metaphysical level, but and empathy. And that is called that God revealed to Moses the 13 attributes of divine compassion, what we call Yud Gimel Midos Harachamim. And on Yom Kippur, indeed, I haven't counted, I should have counted, but we repeat that countless times, many, many times through the prayers, especially in the fifth last prayer. The fifth prayer, the end of the day of Yom Kippur in the Ilah, in the fifth prayer, we keep repeating. It says, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. It's usually sung in the service. And what is that emphasizing? That God revealed to Moses 13 different types of empathy. You know, we usually think of empathy as one-dimensional. I have empathy for you, which is beautiful, compassion. But 13 different ways of empathy God revealed to Moses and says, this is the secret. These are the tools. And it was also a message that you now show that empathy to each other as well. Remember, this isn't just about God showing us empathy, it's also showing empathy to each other. You know, today there's recent discoveries in science about the concept of mirror neurons. I'm sure you've heard of mirror neurons, which is essentially empathy. The classic example is if you see, God forbid, a door about to slam on someone's finger, even though it's not your finger, you'll say ouch, you'll cringe. Why? Because we identify with another person's pain. So it's called mirror neurons, that the neurons mirror each other. And that's why a smile has an effect on someone else, or a scowl, the same thing, because there's something invisible, some energy that we share, that we project, and that we communicate with each other even without words. So the basic concept is that empathy generates empathy. So that's essentially why Yom Kippur, which is all about forgiveness, about kindness and empathy, is saying that yes, you may have wronged me, and maybe you deserve to be a retribution, but I still have empathy. Empathy saying that, you know, to err is human, but to forgive is divine. It means going beyond our comfort zone. And even if someone may have hurt us, we say, you know what, I'm going to rise above that, and I allow myself to open up the door of my own empathy. And in turn, that's what God does. So Yom Kippur is all about that. And that's why these 13 attributes. If we had more time, I can go through the actual 13. I have some of it in my book, 60 Days, in the prayer section in the back, what each of the 13 are. It's really fascinating study of human compassion, human empathy, and of course, divine compassion and empathy. Okay.
That's great. So I have to say, in your book, you show the structure of Yom Kippur. And I wrote an article for the Jewish Week, was one of the most popular articles about how you look at the structure and how Mila is just so unique. And I put up the slide here, but if you could speak to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the fascinating things that lies sometimes the story behind the story, you know, you call it under the hood, behind the curtain, is that the prayers and the Jewish traditions have so many rich layers that many of us may not be familiar with completely. And frankly, none of us are familiar with all of them. I'm constantly learning all the time about new dimensions. But I think when you look at the prayer structure, in Judaism, you discover something unbelievable and very personal. So technically speaking, we know that there are 3 prayers, daily prayers, called Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. The morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, and the evening prayer. That's on a daily basis. On Shabbat and holidays, we add a 4th prayer. It's called Musaf, which actually means an additional prayer. After the Shachrit, after the morning prayer, there's yet another prayer after the reading of the Torah, both on Shabbos and holidays. But there's one day a year that we have 5 prayers, Yom Kippur. The addition to Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, which is where Kol Nidre begins. In addition, in the morning prayer, the Musaf, and then Mincha, the afternoon prayer, there's one additional prayer. It's called Ne'ilah. What we call the gates are all open right before they close. And Ne'ilah is usually prayed right before sundown. And then from there, we go into the close of the holiday. So this isn't just random 3, 4, 5. It actually reflects the essence of what prayer is. We know the essence of prayer is? Prayer is like a ladder. You all know the story of Jacob's dream. So Jacob had a dream where he saw a ladder standing on the ground, reaching up to the heavens. And angels were going down and up on this ladder. Or up and down on the ladder, actually. So the Zohar tells us, as well as other books, other Torah sources, that this ladder is the ladder of prayer. Prayer is a ladder of the human being on earth, reaching upward to heaven. When you pray, what are you doing? You're crying out for your needs, for blessings, for anything that is important in your life, and you're creating a bridge, an interface between heaven and earth, between spirit and matter, between the divine and the human. So the ladder has different stages, and they reflect the 5 different stages of the soul, which is on Yom Kippur. And there are the 5, and I'll name them, I'll enumerate them, that there's 5 dimensions to a person's soul. The first is called nefesh. It's biological life. The fact that the soul gives us life and that we're biologically or medically defined as being alive. The second stage is called ruach. Ruach is emotional life. The third is neshama, intellectual life. The fourth is called chaya, which is called transcendent life. And the fifth, yechida, means oneness, a singularity, a total seamlessness between object and subject, where we completely get absorbed in a reality greater than ourselves. So throughout the year, we can access on our conscious faculties, we can access the nefesh, ruach, neshama, the biological, emotional, and intellectual parts of the soul. On Shabbat and holidays, because of their special qualities, we can access one more dimension, the chaya, the transcendent, which is a little above the conscious. It's more what we call supraconscious. But only once a year, that day of forgiveness, that day of atonement, the day where God opens all the doors for hope and renewal and everything that we've discussed, you add the 5th prayer, that in this prayer, everything is possible. So the truth is, we always have these 5 dimensions, but they're not so easy to access. Yechida, the 5th, is like the essence of the person, where you're able to reach the deepest part of who you are. Like, when a person really loves somebody, and there was a betrayal or there was a violation or something, so how's the only way to reconcile? You have to dig deeper, and you have to find a part of yourself that was not part of the crime, so to speak. And that's reaching into the yechida. It's called yechida, the oneness, the unity, the singularity that we connect. And that's why by Ne'ilah, at the end of Ne'ilah, we say Shema. And we say Baruch Shem 3 times. And then we say Hava Hashem Hu Elokim 7 times. Because what we're doing there is connecting on the most essential and the deepest possible level. And that is the 5th dimension. So psychologically speaking, each of these 5 levels has their own particular personality, and the prayers of Yom Kippur, when you study them, you'll see each one fits the different levels of the journey of the soul on this very soulful spiritual day called Yom Kippur. We're traveling like on a ladder from level 1 of the soul to prayer 2, and level 2 to prayer 3 to prayer 4, and finally to the 5th level, the deepest possible level. And it has to go in an orderly fashion, obviously. You can't jump to the top of the ladder without climbing the lower rungs. So that's a brief summary of the Yom Kippur structure. And it's also fascinating because when you do say the prayers, you can actually identify, and you'll see how the prayers do correspond to these 4 different type of spiritual experiences.
In your book, this was probably one of the more transformational kind of areas where it really does build, and people who read the book can really get a better appreciation of the holiday. And then you touched on Shema. Do you have anything else you want? I mean, it's clearly at the end, like what?
Yeah, Shema is, we know Shema is probably the most famous and fundamental prayer. I mentioned it before, the story with the children during the Holocaust and so on. Remember, the key word in Shema is the final word in it, the last word, echad. Echad. Echad means oneness, unity. It's interesting because for us, we always said that prayer. But today, especially we talk about science and technology, in one word, You ask any scientist, what is the search of science? Science is the search for unity, to find that one unifying principle that connects all the fragments of existence. That's what scientific law is about. Look at communications. The fact here, we're sitting on a Zoom, you can be anywhere on this earth, or maybe even in different planets, and we can sit here and talk together. Communication, the essence of technology in communications, is essentially transcending time and space. So the search for unity, if you think about it, is really the search of the entire human race from the beginning of time. And it's all captured, interestingly, in this one-line prayer. Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, that there's a unity, an intrinsic and unity that connects everything. In the words of physics, it is that even though we have many details, there's like an invisible quilt that connects everything in existence. Everything is connected. It's an illusion to think of the world as fragmented pieces. To the naked eye, it seems fragmented. So when we say Shema, we're really addressing a fundamental principle, the idea that everything really is connected with each other. Now, if you think about it, of the implications of that in our own personal lives, ask yourself, sometimes we feel our lives are fragmented. You know, you're being tugged in so many directions. Family responsibilities, work responsibilities, friends, social pressures, demands, expectations. Sometimes you feel literally like you're split into 100 pieces, or even more than that. So comes the Shema and says, no, find that unifying hub. I mentioned before, Rosh Hashanah, the idea of mission, that one mission that connects the dots, that connects it all, that creates an integration. And the way we understand that is that if you think of your life, that you're here to serve, you're here to serve God, you're here to serve higher purpose, you're here to serve others, that permeates all the details of your life. When do details become so demanding is when you don't see the way they're all connected. But when you understand that they're all being driven toward one higher purpose, you suddenly experience something called harmony. And look, the fact of the matter is that human beings abhor chaos. You come to your home and the whole house is a mess. There's something that's very grating. Even little children, give them different objects with different shapes and sizes, they'll fit the squares in the squares, the circles in the circles, the spheres in the spheres.
Oh, I muted him. He's muted. Shit.
Rabbi, I think you went on mute.
Yeah, he's
Where'd you lose me?
like about 30 seconds ago, we just lost you.
Okay, so I was saying that look at human beings, fragmentation is something that we're abhorred by. Look, children, what do children naturally do? They will fit a circle in a circle, give them objects of different shapes. They'll fit the shapes each in their proper place because we gravitate toward connecting things, which brings me to one most important point. The word for echad is the gematria, the same equivalent as the word ahava, love. Human beings thrive on connections, on attachment. 9 months we spend in our mother's womb, completely submerged, protected in the embryonic fluids of our mother. Even young children in a healthy environment are constantly nurtured. We thrive on attachment, and when we don't have attachment that's proper echad, we will seek it out sometimes in unhealthy ways. What they call all addictions are essentially attachment disorder. You're attached to the wrong thing. So the idea of Hashem Echad and Shema, especially in all the prayers, we say it every day, but especially on Yom Kippur, when we say it, and then we say the next line, Baruch Shem, loud, we're essentially declaring that we are looking for the unifying principle, the unifying element that connects all the fragments of our lives. And every one of us can meditate on that in our own particular way. So the Shema is that type of power. And if you remember, I said the fifth level of the soul is called what? Yechida, oneness, singularity. It's finding that one connection that connects all the details. So think of it like a cosmic symphony where you have so many different musical notes and musical instruments, but they all join. It's the harmony within the diversity, which is the beauty of all real experiences. We're not looking for clones. We're looking for a harmony that connects all the dots and all the details. That's in a way, the essence of what the Shema is all about.
So this has all been great. You've covered an incredible amount of material. Is there a closing kind of statement you want to make and again, not to put it together, but to leave us as we go and embark on the holiday?
My preference would be to hear from everybody because I love to interact and the feedback, but I understand that we can't really do that. So look, I'll say this. I would love to meet everyone individually, but being that we're here, I want to say this. I want the emphasis of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is the indispensability, the value that each of you have, your dignity. There's nothing more dignified than the idea that God put you on this earth and that you have something unique to contribute, that you and only you can contribute. To me, if that's the takeaway that we take away from Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, that's a success. You have something to contribute that only you can contribute. I can't do it for you, you can't do it for me. And in that process, we all complement each other. I mentioned the Cosmic Symphony. I'm always touched by the tragic poem of Oliver Wendell Holmes called The Voiceless, where he says, alas, to those that die with their song still inside them. You hear that? Alas, to those that die with their song still inside them. You have a song inside you, many songs, and you want to make sure you sing that song. Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur gives us the courage, the power to sing your unique song. Or as some say, you were born an original, don't become a copy. Rosh Hashanah is this declaration of your originality. Now, obviously, we have much in common, and we need to work with each other. But working with each other is also recognizing the individual power. So I feel honored, and I thank you again, Mark, and David, and everyone involved for making this happen. I feel honored to be able to be here with divine souls, that we can cross-pollinate, and we can synchronize, and we can synergize, and create something that's more than the sum of the parts. And I invite you all, I'd love to be able to stay in touch if you want to continue discussing anything that was touched upon. Mark can give you ways to reach me if you need that. And let's, so I most importantly, I want to conclude with a blessing that everybody should be blessed, be written and sealed in the book of life, Ksiva v'chasimah tova, Shana tova, and metuka, a sweet year. And even the challenges should also be transformed into opportunities, all in good health, abundance beyond your wildest imagination, materially and spiritually. And may you fulfill, you and your families, your unique mission in illuminating and spiritualizing your corner of this world.
Thank you very much, Yasha Koach. So on the screen right now, if you want to connect with Rabbi Jacobson's Meaningful Life Center, you could go to his website. If you're interested in this PowerPoint that we had on the screen, you could write to his daughter, Rashi, at meaningfullife.com. And again, Rabbi, thank you very much. This was a fabulous evening. Thank you so much.
I thank you, and I thank all of you.
Thanks again for joining us. L'Shana Tova.
Not Tova. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that was great, really great.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Shana Tova.
Not tova. You said 9 o'clock. It's 9 o'clock.
We did it. It's like a TV show. We did a great job.
What's the next program?
Well, we're gonna announce it on the network. It was very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark, for putting it together, and whoever David is. Thank you very much. Thanks, Rabbi. It was amazing. Really elevate our holidays.
Yeah.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks again.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah. You too, David. It was great working with you. Yeah.
Nice to see
Thank
you,
you,
Mark.
David.
David, thank you so much.
Take
A lot of
care.
work went into this, I can see. Well done.